Well, hey, Sat here. I hope you're doing really well, and thanks for joining us for this summer short as part of our Mindfulness series here at C3 Reflect. And today we're talking about the topic of fasting. The message title is Fast Forward. And I thought it'd be really helpful just to take a few moments to look at what does fasting look like for the Christian? What is it? Do we need to do it? Should everyone be doing it? How often should we be doing it? And just all of that kind of jazz. So the first thing that's just obviously fairly important to say is that what is fasting? Well, there are many different types of fasting in our world today. Of course, intermittent fasting, IF, is big today, culturally very in, and there's plenty of commentary about the health benefits and so on. I'm not really going to talk about the medical side of it. It's not really my area of expertise, but there's plenty of stuff out there that is pretty interesting. But I really want to talk about the spiritual benefits of fasting. And so fasting, of course, is going without food. Sometimes in the Bible, you also see going without water as well, but pretty much always it's food, whether partial fast of food or a total fast. And that fast can last from anything from part of a day to a whole day, days, even weeks. Jesus took 40 days to fast before he started his ministry. Queen Esther in the Old Testament, she called, I think, a 3-day fast for the people as she was going to approach the king and for favor. And so what we see is that fasting is like a tool that can be used for a specific purpose, to accelerate something that you want to see, you're believing for. Also in the Old Testament, we see fasting actually as a command for the people of Israel, for example, on the Day of Atonement and so on. Fasting was connected to both repentance, but also breakthrough, believing for something from God. But in the New Testament, it's kind of interesting because we don't see fasting now as something that we are commanded to do, but we do see it as a tool that is something you can do, that there are great benefits. Think of it a little bit like praying in tongues. There are plenty of Christians who don't pray in tongues, and that's okay. You don't have to pray in tongues to be a Christian. However, I do believe that praying in tongues is a great tool available to us that is going to strengthen our spirit. So fasting is a little bit like that. It's something that is available to us, but we don't have to do it. And you'll see across, of course, other religions that fasting is something you have to do. But in Christianity, it's a tool that's available to us. So let's have a look at what Jesus says about fasting. He says this in Matthew 6, verse 16. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Okay, so there's a few things there. First of all, of course, Jesus says, when you fast, which kind of implies that fasting is something that we're kind of supposed to do. He doesn't give any specifics, but he's just like, hey, this is a good thing. You should probably do this. Also, secondly, fasting is something that's very personal between you and God. It's not about, showcasing to the world, like how spiritual I am, look at me, here's my thing. Jesus is like, hey, just focus on doing it in secret, in private. And so I'm sure you can tell some friends and things like that. But this is really something between you and God. And of course, lastly here, the thing I love is Jesus actually says there is a reward. There is a reward for fasting. God sees fasting and somehow it does something. So we're going to talk about what that is. Because we already said that fasting is a tool that can be used to accelerate a purpose. And that's really important for us to understand. Fasting is not just something that we just do for no reason. We don't just do it because that's what we do. Fasting is always attached to something, and it's attached to prayer, which is always attached to something else as well. And so when we fast, maybe there's something we're believing for breakthrough in our world. Maybe we're going for a job interview, or maybe we're believing for health in a certain area, or maybe we're believing for the salvation of a friend. Well, fasting is a tool that we can use to accelerate that desire and that prayer and that thing that we're believing from God. And so what we're going to find is when we fast, it's like there is this heightening of spiritual hunger. We've been talking in this series about the mind, of course, mindfulness, and the relationship between body, mind, and spirit. Well, what happens when we abstain from some of the comforts in our body, namely food? I mean, who doesn't love food? What we're actually doing is we're making a declaration that God is my source. And what happens on the inside of us when we do that is we are strengthening our spirit, which in turn strengthens our mind. And so in this topic around mental health, we need to understand that actually fasting is a great tool that we can use to believe for personal breakthrough. So if there is stuff in our mind like fear or anxiety, or there's certain habits or things that are taking place that we want to break, then we can actually use fasting as a tool to accelerate some of those things. It signifies our desperation, our spiritual hunger, and it also gives us focus. It gives us focus. You know, we're removing something from our life, and we're being aligned as a human being, and we're saying, this is what I want. This is what James says about the mind. He says this in chapter 1, verse 5. He says, if anyone of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And we know Jesus says, hey, ask and you'll receive. And so it seems to me that there's something when we are double-minded or we're not focused in our prayer, we may not receive the things that we want from God. And so fasting can be used as a tool to help us focus and be deliberate and just really cry out to God for a very specific purpose. And the second thing, of course, around fasting is that we spend a lot of time dealing with food. We're thinking about food. We're dreaming about food, we're buying food, we're preparing food, we're eating food, and then we're cleaning up after food. And add all that together and you've got a reasonable amount of time in the day, even just one meal, your evening meal. You've easily got an hour there, unless you're doing some very poor cooking. And so, what happens when you take that hour and you pray? When was the last time you prayed for an hour? I mean, wow, we're going to find that getting rid of something in our lives, getting rid of food for a temporary basis is actually going to enable us to dig deep and actually just very practically pray. And so we understand here that fasting is not just something that we just do kind of willy-nilly. It's something that is attached to purpose. It's something that we do with faith and we do with prayer. And so it's strengthening us on the inside. And Jesus tells us right here that God is pleased when we seek him, and he will reward you for fasting. So that's pretty cool. And I think, this is not like a topic that we talk a lot about in the Western church. But actually, if we were to look throughout the church history and the early church, we would see that just as Jesus describes there, it was actually a practice that was very integrated in everyday life. So, hey, I hope that's been helpful, encouraging, opened up your mind and your thinking. And of course, let me encourage you, if you are considering doing a fast, or particularly for a longer period of time, please do get medical advice and all of that. Insert disclaimers here. Don't go and do anything stupid, but start small. Start where you are and start exploring what fasting can do for your mind, for your spirit. I hope that's been helpful. God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for watching today. You might like some of these videos over here or over here. Of course, hit subscribe. And we do actually have a weekly email list where we send out content that we think is encouraging and helpful. To jump on that, just head to the description below. We'll see you guys soon.